Let's start off with, how about we start off with Mr. Sathish Krishnan, the head CRM, redBus. Mr. Sathish?
Hi.
I think we've given you enough time. What's the gift that you're looking forward to on your 500th birthday?
Do away with the mobile.
Do away?
Yeah, you should. At times, you need to get the deja vu, right? I think while we talk about touchless technologies way forward, at some point in time, you have to start from ground zero. I am sure I'll be happy if we can.
Wow, okay. Very, very interesting. I'm sure by the time Mrs. Satish is 500, there will be technology and mobile will be done away. So that is very futuristic. Thank you so very much. Our next leader is Mr. Nalin Jain, the Chief Customer Officer and Head of Operations, Godrej Housing Finance. Ms. Jain, same question.
Since the topic is touchless, I think I think 500 is too far. It may happen earlier. Is if I think about something and it just appears from wherever the order is done and it just happens as I'm thinking it's happening.
Wow, we had a show, right? That Shakalaka Boom Boom pencil.
Yeah.
Person would just draw, but you've taken it one notch higher. Just think and it appears. Fantastic. Wow. Can't wait for the future. And of course, our moderator, Mr. Jain, Vice President, Marketing and Customer Services, Head Loyalty and Shopper Insights, Reliance Retail Limited. Sir, what would your answer be?
Well, Nikita, God forbid that we all start living to 500 and 600. This world would be an unlivable place. But on a hypothetical scenario, by then, we'd all be, in that much period, we'd probably be able to live that long because we'd all become androids. The technology would be embedded within our bodies. So, as Satish said, that he doesn't want to have mobiles would be all within ourselves. Our eyes would be, lenses and things that are seeing things. Our brain would be a computer. It'll all be incorporated within our own body itself, The only thing that I'd like to have more than that would be, clean air. So I presume that our noses will then become air filters. So imagining, 500, 600 years down the line is too far ahead. But even if we lived a year, 100, 150, that will become a problem for us. So with that note, I think we can take this ahead. So a lot of stuff that we are going to talk about will sound like wizardry for a lot of our customers. So I welcome all the people who are logged in to our discussion. We've lost one of our panelists, so I presume that we've got Sathish Krishnan, who's head of CRM for redBus. Satish is a customer experience leader with 20 years of diverse experience across sectors and across varied functions. Satish is, an evangelist for, the 3 Ps of management. He looks at, he says, people, product, and processes enabled by technology, and experience in handling large teams, managing budgets, etc., is what is his forte. Satish is one of the 50 most impactful customer service professionals and was awarded as such by 𝐄𝐝𝐢𝐭 in 2019. We have Nalin Jain with us, who's, who leads operations, marketing, and customer experience strategy and service delivery at Godrej Housing Finance. Myself, I am, I work with Reliance Retail Limited as Vice President, Marketing and Customer Services. And I also head the Loyalty and the Shopper Insights function. I have roughly about 30 years of experience with consulting, insights, and research. I come from a background where, today's customer experience must be grounded in, which is insights. I have experience both in India, Middle East, and the US. And I worked, on the consulting side, I worked with a huge lot of companies, many of them from the Fortune 500. So I bring to this discussion a certain amount of experience based for a very pretty long time. So I hope we can then, have an enlightening discussion between the 3 of us. So, I'd like to start with one thing. As I was discussing this earlier with you and later on with someone else, I got to, think that this is the area where people are talking about wizardry with marketing, with technology. and technology in marketing. So this is what the customer sees. So the moment we talk about touchless technologies, these are things that the customer is now experiencing, and these are completely new and completely cutting edge. Things like virtual reality. So a customer is able to walk through a store sitting at home, and is able to point at products there, and is able to see different color options and get the prices and everything just by pointing towards them. Now that's touchless technology for me. Another person spoke about walking into a hotel and not having to speak with anybody. The person behind the counter standing 8 feet behind, and they just they took his face photograph. And that's it. That did face recognition. And they said, okay, now please go on to your room. Your door opens just by looking at your face. Fantastic. So these are the new technologies which are fantastic, which are coming in. But to look at it, these technologies have been around for quite some time. What we are seeing is an accelerated adoption of contactless, touchless, technologies. Many of these technologies have been there for a decade or more at least. Companies had to bring in disruption on their own to be able to get these into place earlier. The pandemic brought in the kind of disruption where everybody is now running to adopt these technologies to be able to deliver to their customers. So whichever area that we look at of a company to a customer's interaction, whether it's pre-sales in terms of customer acquisition, we are looking at sales where it's payment, delivery, after sales, whether it's in terms of post-sales servicing, CRM. At each stage now, companies are trying to talk to their customers or reach out their customers and redefine those touch points through a contactless. And the pandemic is what is pushing this a lot. What the pandemic did was completely disrupted normal behavior. People couldn't go out. You couldn't, commuting was banned. All local transport had stopped. People started working from home. Along with working from home, they were doing shopping from home. So in that kind of a scenario, how does a company get across? So all these technologies, and thankfully, over the last 15 years, you have the basis for this huge growth already coming in the form of, mobile, internet and mobile data, which is available at a price which is so cheap that everybody can afford it. So that base had already been built in. Then came in, a disruption in the form of demonetization, which made people to start using digital payment options. People still had a lot of suspicion about what will happen to their money. But the moment the pandemic happened and people were forced, it changed attitudes drastically. So today there are companies, and probably, Nalin from BFSI would be able to talk about it later, where people are able to pay for services upfront and get delivered those products and services across on the net. We from the retail at least can't do that yet. We still have to be tangible in terms of the products that we deliver, but there are so many other of our processes which can go on to do. So I think that's the background to which we are now going to talk about touchless technologies. Satish, can I call upon you, to share a bit of an experience? Before we go into the serious part of this, can I just request both you gentlemen to share one experience, which is this futuristic contactless variety, which you experienced and you said, wow, ye to maja aa gaya. Satish, you're on mute.
I think I had a great touchless experience maybe a couple of months back when I had to get to stay in a property. I had been on a vacation, and then I think this is the pre-pandemic and post-pandemic comparison, right? I think everything was done. You had to, let's say, send a link with all the documentation done, and let's say you don't need to wait in the, let's say, reception to get to your, let's say, initial formalities. The room is get assigned, and then you get a message, and then you carry on. And obviously, you didn't have a face recognition, right, in the elevators, but I'm sure you have a mechanism where obviously you are given a card, and it's a dedicated sanitized card that you use it and then get to your room. I think this is more a journey, I would say, Jay. I think from what we experienced, right? Just to give an example, right? I think if you look at it, the pre-pandemic and post-pandemic, I call it as MSD. M is for mask, S for sanitizer, and D is a disinfectant. We carry MSD all the time, starting from the day you get out of your house to, let's say, for a walk, or let's say for your work, to carry on your vehicle, or you have to even get something at your home, right? You even look at, how do I really, even if somebody comes, you open the door, you want to be, let's say, protect yourself. Everything needs to go on. So I think from a journey, I think, as you rightly said, the things have got really accelerated. Not that these things were not there. But the larger problem is how do these now get into every, let's say, customer lifestyle journey itself is a journey. I think in many industries like hospitality, it's far more easily done and, I mean, taken care, because you have let's say, an established system in place and so on. But things like mobility, or let's say your day-to-day interactions in retail possibly would take more time if you have to move to retail, because of the diversity of the people, diversity of the geography that you're working on, and the adaptability of, while the pandemic is helping people to adapt things faster. But if you look at a country as diverse, you have set of people who have still not come into, let's say, who are still in the offline. They're not even digitized. You look at these folks who are digitized to get into touchless, right? So I would say, I think the industries take time. Certain industries are in the process of ahead of the curve. Certain industries are in the process of, let's say, looking at how fast do we move, and in terms of, let's say, how catering to the diverse set of customers that they have. And it's a journey, I would say, which will propel in the next couple of, let's say, years to be far more, let's say, realistic, and we can look at things shaping up much faster, as you rightly said. And this is like a hockey stick, right? You have the curve now, making it extremely the organization need to be flexible to adapt to these new technologies to create a great customer experience. I would put it that way.
Great. Nalin, would you like to share an experience that is very evocative and something that
sure. Thanks, Jayant, and hi everyone. So, Jain, I think I was very pleased to see a recent shift in our airports and the the entire way for my recent visit, where something like what you were talking was, at the time of entry with some QR code scanning, they captured my face with a camera standing on something, and then that was used throughout for me to show my face and just move on, and I didn't have to really take out a paper and show it to them, and then an ID card and this and that. That happened once, and then the entire journey was very, very smooth. It happened at the Bangalore airport, and I've been there multiple times. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't work, but yeah, that's part of the journey around it. But that was like really super to see that initiatives with the state government is being, or the government really is doing around this piece was really amazing. I didn't have to really take out anything after I first they clicked the picture and moved on. So that's been my recent touchless really experience that I really wanted it to happen, more than anything else. It was not forced upon me. That's from that part of it.
In fact, that's the power of technology. Some of the areas where we used to struggle so much, just a little bit of time before, is now becoming significantly smoother. And you've got organizations that you never expected to be delivering this kind of surprisingly smooth service, also adopting it and offering it. So that's the phenomenal aspect of it. It can change the way that we do business. It can change convenience for customers significantly. So it's a phenomenal activity. It's an exciting time to be in. Though, this exciting time has been pushed through by a rather painful, pandemic, but it's exciting times to be in, and the kind of changes that we can bring about are phenomenal. Okay, so, Nalin, let me continue with you. Now, being from the BFSI, so your industry was already in the process of, bringing in digital products and services. With this acceleration, where have you gone? Can you throw a little bit of light about what the BFSI industry and what your organization maybe is doing, which is cutting edge and, trying to make this entire experience for customers better?
Sure. Thanks, Jain, for that question. So, I'll start by giving a little bit of the, background and point of view here. Is that I think we are as an industry or as companies, we are now at least in the post-pandemic time for sure. At least from mindset point of view, Can't say that we are, physically whether we are there or not, but from mindset point of view, definitely. Given if at all the third wave comes around, I'm sure we are much better prepared. We won't be as complacent as we were in the second wave, and when it came in, we were not prepared to really look at it. Danger still looms around it, but in spirit, I think we are slightly out of it, and things are coming back to normal. What has happened, if you see over the period of time, and specifically, speaking from BFSI, I'm sure it's true otherwise as well, is that preferences of customers and people, call it employees or anybody else, have changed. And I think a lot of it is here to stay, but remains to be seen. Next 12 months is critical for us to see what will stay and what will just go back. Just because of convenience point of view, sometimes you just adapt to something because it's the need of the hour, and just go back if it's more simpler around that piece. From specifically BFSI, Jen, what's happened with us is that we've been focusing on digitization, and that's been the trend for us all this while. Definitely this sad event has accelerated the entire thing and adoption more from the customer side of view than the organization point of view. I thought the customers were adopting much faster because of the event, but otherwise we were holding on as organizations. We were slightly slow in moving that, so that both sides has got quite accelerated. A big change that I see here is that everybody was focusing on onboarding, acquiring, just getting the customers onboarded and just having them there. What has changed is that now people are looking at the life cycle of the product for digitization, for service, for making it touchless, for making it convenient, and everything else that goes along with it. The personal view here I have is that there's lots of technology available, and some of it we'll talk about it. But in the end, what will stay and which will really drive the adoption from any industry, and specifically BFSI, is simple and accessible technology. We can make fancy technology, we can do this thing, but if it's an effort for a customer to really adopt to anything, unless it's an event like what we are going through, he will definitely go back unless you make it simple and accessible and make his life more easier and convenient from their point of view. And that's where I think the specifically BFSI is moving to, just try and make it more simple, more easier, quicker, faster, and that's the insights that the customers have really given us. Yeah, that's my bit on this.
That's great. In fact, that's something that we talk about a lot. Everything that we do has to be done from the customer's perspective. What does happen is, once an organization starts investing, and this requires a tremendous amount of investment in developing a backend, in training your people, in putting in a culture, you tend to start thinking more from the organization's point of view and less from the customers. So in the end, you are offering the customer something which may or may not be great. Yep. You've done a fantastic job of investing or putting in technology and whatever, but the customer can be put out by the smallest of things. Yep. One of our topics here is that zero UI, next big thing for online businesses. Now, really speaking, the whole idea that there is zero UI doesn't sit well with me. I mean, there would be a humanized UI. So less tedious, less obstructive UI, more easy to deal with UI is what we'll be looking at. So zero trouble UI is what I would talk about. Satish, now your company has been in the service kind of an industry, where you help people book in their tickets, book in maybe travel arrangements and whatever. And that's something which requires a fair amount of back and forth with what can I do if this is not available, what else is available, and how do I do that? So how do you guide people through this? And what is your perspective upon the kind of interface that you need to have? See, we are coming in from a perspective that just 20 years back, we only had another human being to deal with, right? And we are so much, it's ingrained in us. That's our DNA, that we interact as human beings. Now I'm interacting with a screen, or I'm interacting with the company may have invested in artificial AI-based VR or something. So I'm interacting with something which looks like a great deal of wizardry. As a customer, how do I, start beginning to trust it? How do I start beginning to think that this is for me? What all do we do as, as companies and service providers to make that happen? So over to you, sir.
Okay. See, basis, I think the retail experience in a personal front, right? I think when the e-commerce wave started and we largely, let's say, communicating, one is the customer segment. In any retail business, you have the customer. And another side is the stakeholder. And many businesses, like in case of, let's say, brick and mortar retail, it would be the suppliers who, or the warehouses and so on. In a typical business like us, we have the entire, we work on the entire mobility with, let's say, the bus operator ecosystem. So the challenge has always been the language, right? I think the customer speaks in a country as diverse as India, we have multiple languages. But when you talk about the customer issues and then you take it to, let's say, the stakeholder, and it's a two-way flow information that happen. Largely today, there is a gap in terms of how do you seamlessly work, right? I see a large opportunity in terms of touchless technologies playing a big way because people are not comfortable with UI. A person who could buy, let's say, reading an app in English or even in Hindi for that matter, may not be conversant in typing in something in English. So one of the need that I think I personally said across sectors is people would want, can there be, let's say, a voice recognition where I just record it and share it to whomever that I want. I want to speak to my customer. Can I record and do? One is the human interaction. Somebody reaches out to you, you help them. But when somebody has to actually reverse back, people may not be comfortable writing a lengthy mail or, let's say, would want to chat, but they would want to just in an instant want to share their, let's say, view or provide, let's say, it could be a resolution or help. The biggest way is do through voice. And the advantage of voice as a touchless technology is its scalability across languages. I just need to, let's say, if you have to give a simple equivalent of it in WhatsApp, you can just record your voice and give it its one-to-one, or maybe in a group you can do that. But when it happens to, let's say, many-to-many communication, in that way, voice helps diversely across languages, right? WhatsApp still, you do it, maybe you can record in the language, but still largely you communicate in English or maybe write the particular language in English. But voice as a touchless technology helps a lot. So some of the work that possibly I think companies can do in the area is largely in a country, especially like India, is in terms of how do you leverage on how this as a touchless technology, how do you use to communicate better across people, right? The other aspect of it is, I'm sure some of the work as organizations do, especially on, let's say, using QR code and payments. I think is the most buzzword here, right? In terms of how people use, let's say, I think even it helping, let's say, a segment like the generations before us using now easily payment has become such an important thing, how it can help, let's say, communicate better, do the payments. So those are some of the areas which largely I think the work will happen in terms of getting across the customer journeys much more easier, make it more scalable, and make it, especially in a country like India, and there are much more countries like outside India as well, who have a larger ecosystem who needs to work on these kind of technologies to be far more ahead in terms of the customer experiences. It could be a pre-sale, it could be post-sale, and so on.
Very valid point, very humorously, it reminded me of that little clip that I saw where an Irishman is trying to tell an elevator, a voice-activated elevator, to take him up to the 7th or the 10th floor, and ends up with all kinds of things. So that's the. I mean, we virtually have a Tower of Babel in India. A number of languages that we speak and the accents that we have. The completely, it's a complete mess if we are trying to bring that kind of a thing in. We also face problems with that.
Yeah.
So language is one major issue where we are trying to bring in voice-activated or voice-supported systems. Because people talk in such different ways.
Dialects, yeah.
There's just so many dialects, and with language comes in tonality or sentimentality, the way, with what is, in what way is the person talking. So all of this makes a huge difference. And I'm sure that's an area, I mean, many of the speakers who were there in the previous sessions were touching upon these things. I'm sure the technology is evolving as we go along. This is a very nascent, field as it is. I mean, it's just a few years old, and there will be huge developments to it, I'm sure. Many of the peculiar problems that we face in the industry today will be taken care of, I'm quite sure, very shortly by the tech experts. Nalin, anything you'd like to add to that?
Yeah, sure, Jain. So, couple of points. I think, voice is one of the first touchless, technologies which is picking up space. There is going to be journey because, for any technology that comes in, there is always, there's time for adoption and coming in. And like Sathish mentioned, it's it's still to be improved. We need to, learn. We need to make it sharper. Again, going back to my point that we need to make it more simple and accessible as as we grow. Then it's when the maturity of the tech happens and we can use it. For example, the use cases for voice is far too many. One is the simple, elevator example that you gave, that I want to, use the elevator and not touch it. It can also lead to some kind of a voice biometric at some stage, where you can authenticate, and, the future is personalization. I always believe that n=1 is the new personalization formula, that you have to give me personalization at my level. I'm not a homogeneous segment, that you segment me as, age bucket this, growing in this city and done this, done that, and then it become a homogeneous segment. But it's now we reached a stage that we have to micro segment it, and then maybe lead to n=1 at some day. The biggest challenge, I foresee, Jayant, here is that there needs to be an ecosystem. Unfortunately, what will happen is that all of us will start giving our data, our identity to each of these services that we want to adopt. There has to be, for any technology to really, really grow, we need to have an ecosystem where everybody can go and, go to that same person and get the data from whatever I allow them to give it to you, and then give me the service around it. Otherwise, it becomes very, very uncomfortable. Beyond a point from customers, point of view, really, that, I want to go to this hotel, he takes a picture, he tracks my voice, and it's with him. Then I go to another hotel, I have to do another thing again with him. Then I go to another person. It just continues. So there needs to be, I think, a lot of ecosystem development for any technology to adopt and mature. So that's, is going to be very, very key in the touchless space as we go along, as in what ecosystem gets built in. I think that'll be the flywheel that will break off, wherever we get better ecosystems around it.
Very valid point, Nalin. I mean, yes, Sathish, please go ahead.
Just to add, I think from what Nalin said, right, like you have your Aadhaar fingerprint repository. If you all have our voice libraries, you just need to say a standard.
Can I request you to come closer to the mic?
Yeah, can you hear me now?
Yeah, much better.
Yeah. I think just taking from what Nalin said, typical, you have your Aadhaar fingerprint being stored. I'm sure all of us have our voice library stored as for a standard word or a standard script, which you always keep checking, and you just need to send it, and then you authenticate that you are the person and get a seamless experience. I mean, that's how technology can go beyond what we.
In fact, I think that's a very valid concern that Nalin and both Sathish have come up with. I mean, besides all the convenience and the ease of using, the other side of this is, the customer has a right to be forgotten. Right? Now, all these businesses that we are in, we keep collecting data and more data. Today, I mean, all our businesses function with a huge amount of data that we cover. Most of the technology that we are working with is looking at big data and trying to provide analysis based on that. And so we talk about collecting billions and zillions and trillions and God knows how many bits of data on every person. Now, is it going to be safe for people? At the beginning of this, the host asked us, 500 years down the line, maybe I have a worry that if I live even on 500 years, another 50 years, somebody else has more information about me than I do myself, right? I mean, they may simply create a virtual self of me somewhere else and start doing it. So those concerns are something that we also need to keep in mind when we offer these kind of services to our customers. For how long are we going to retain their data? And I mean, in trying to offer them, either visually, with visual, recognition or voice recognition or any of those kind of things, we are storing data which is very unique to each individual. Now, how far can we go with that? And that's I think something that all service providers like us, or all businesses that deal with large number of customers. See, the company that I come from probably deals with 1 out of every 2 Indians on a daily basis. Now, consider the huge amount of data that we'd be holding. Now, that's really not something that you would give to either a government or a corporation. Individuals would have concerns about it. Now, keeping that in mind, and also the fact that it makes life so much easier and simpler, these are the two trade-offs. I mean, the trade-off is how much am I ready to tell and how much